on thin ice, but I don't know what I said in the Tusk podcast.
You really didn't say much. You mostly just dug into my couch.
Yeah, I was blacked out. I couldn't help it.
Yeah, if we were recording, it made for great content, but for audio, it's just awkward dead air. It's me and Connor trying to figure out what you're doing.
I'm really upset 'cause I really love that movie, but the last thing I remember is Johnny Depp talking to the two.
Yeah, Johnny Depp, one of those 20-minute dialogue where nothing
and
happened.
that's like the last thing I remember, besides waking up momentarily and going, bah, and then going back.
Alright, let's start.
Alright.
3, 2, 1. Hello!
Hello!
And welcome to the heterochroMEDIA podcast. Man, I regret choosing that name. I chose it as a last resort.
Why do you regret it?
Because I'm like, it's so hard to say. But
heterochroMEDIA?
It's surprisingly hard to say for
heterochroMEDIA.
I'm just gonna hammer it in now.
heterochroMEDIA.
We can get an AI to say it if it makes you feel better.
Yeah, get one of those Reddit voices.
Alright, we're back. I hit a button. I'm not used to this setup. I gotta get used to having a giant computer in front of me.
Yeah, usually we run this off your iPad, right?
Yeah, for a dainty
I
little
forgot
microphone.
about that.
Now it's gotten bigger.
Well, it's been a while since we filmed a podcast.
Since
the last podcast I remember filming was Christmas.
Not counting last week, the last podcast was in February.
Gatsby.
Was it really?
It was Gatsby,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the last one I remember.
Yeah, which still, at the time of recording, has not come out because the editor,
You got more important stuff going on.
I'm dead
Homie's
inside.
in college. You gotta do college shit.
I remember doing college shit.
I'm dead inside.
I do college shit too, but I'm also not the one that edits this, so.
Yeah, so I'm dead inside. But the good news is that's coming in very shortly. And once we get to June, I will have free time, and I'll be able to now edit it all right on a nice and lovely laptop.
You got that brand new computer?
I'm looking forward to it. Editing should be made much smoother. Weekly upload should be, weekly. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that was great. That was great, English Shandy folks. So, we don't want to do.
Stay tuned, all four of our fans.
Yeah, stay tuned. So what we're doing this week, we are going to be comparing, for the first time ever, we're actually comparing two versions of the same product.
Yeah, though I will say the more modern version struck me as more of just like its own thing compared to the original.
Well, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it.
So what we're talking about is, in honor of Memorial Day weekend, and I said it's in honor of Memorial Day weekend 5 seconds ago. It's not Memorial Day when you're watching this. Unless it's Memorial Day 2024,
we have a few hours
2025.
Left,
We got well, actual Memorial Day's Monday, so.
Yeah,
well, we got about an hour and 11 minutes till 11 o'clock, so.
The 11th hour.
So we have 2 hours and 11 minutes.
Should I just wait and not upload this till Veterans Day so I can do the 11th? Yeah. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna talk about All Quiet on the Western Front. That's what we're gonna talk about.
Excellent book, excellent movie.
There have been many different versions of this book. We're only talking about two of the versions, probably the two most famous versions, the 1930 film, and then the most recent adaptation that came out in 2022.
Netflix.
Yep. So
I can't believe Netflix made this. Or had
Netflix been on my shit list lately.
This is in the waning phases of when Netflix was
great. Cool. This one, the last films they're gonna produce is actually good until they rot and die. So.
Wow.
Because they don't let people. Everyone knows the issues.
Without saying which is, I have a hard time comparing the two. Because I will say, as far as like, I'll let you go.
Well, before we get into the comparisons, let's just simply talk about the story of All Quiet on the Western Front. It's simple. Now, we all three here have varying degrees of exposure to it. We will start with the most simplest.
Oh boy! I literally did not know what this was about until this afternoon. I knew it was about World War I, but I didn't really
Who gave you the crash course?
Wendigoon gave me the crash course.
Well, you were in good hands, yeah.
But I was in good hands. The only I'm not like a historian or a war guy, so the most experience I have with war is being like it pisses me off because people die and leaders just like sit on their asses.
Wait until we introduce you to Girls on the Panzer.
I've seen the.
You've seen a few episodes.
I've seen a few episodes.
It'll turn all otaku into historians.
But like, for real, okay. I know this is like very like off topic, but I was in class when the Ukrainian war thing like came out, And I just remember
Came
being
out like the new hit album.
February 24th, 2022.
And I just remember
Dated
being
at the
like,
shelves.
I remember coming home and being so pissed off. I was like punching walls. I'm like, why? I don't even. It's not even my issue.
Meanwhile, when the Ukrainian war started, it was my birthday, February 24th, and
but like, it was.
It was, and I remember I had this weird feeling for like a week. I was watching things like escalate in Eastern Europe, and I was like, there might be a war starting soon. And sure enough, I wake up on my birthday, and I pull out my phone in the morning, like I do, turn off my alarm, and the first thing I see is the Reddit headlines about, Russia invaded Ukraine. I'm like, oh shit, that's
All
a
I
problem.
remember is that meme from Fox News where they went to commercial during the bombing. A little bit of chicken fried, go there
Are
on
you
95.
so
Yes, they had an Applebee's commercial right in the middle of the
That's so
bombardment of
funny.
Kiev. And it
Oh,
was,
that's bad.
It
That's
was
America
bad. It
for
was
you.
perfect, horrible timing. That's all I remember. So,
Yeah, no.
I just remember I was in English literature,
When you heard about it.
and my teacher was like, "OMG," and I was like,
No, I remember that whole day at work, I was like completely out of it because I was like, shit, like a war just started in Eastern Europe. And of course, back then, I think,
back then, all 1 year ago.
well,
It feels like
I think
forever.
most people back in 2022,
Two.
"That was 2022."
yeah,
Yes.
it feels like longer. That's why I had to think
Holy
about it.
shit!
I think most people in February 22 did not expect Ukraine to hold out as long as they have.
No.
But I was focusing on passing classes.
Like, I figured it was going to be like a couple weeks, we were going to see some really bad shit happen, and then everything was going to go quiet again. But Ukraine proved us all wrong, and they've held out for over a year now.
May 28, 2023.
Shout
time
out
recording. Yes, shout out to Andre.
Shout out to Andre and all the other dudes in the Ukrainian military that we've met over the years.
We appreciate you.
Yeah.
We love you.
Well, yeah, now you have the freaking Russian
wish
Free
you
Legion
well.
invading Russia. You have the Ukrainians getting ready for their summer counteroffensive.
Congratulations, Andre. You're on a podcast with 14 subscribers.
Yeah,
Andre's
buddy.
never going to see this probably.
You've never met me.
No.
Yep. Never even talked to you.
So the point being, Jess's exposure to All
War
Quiet
in
on Western
general
Front,
has just been shit.
All Quiet on Western Front is minimal.
Yeah.
A casual observer, as you would.
A synopsis video and then the actual new movie.
From Wendigoon, so it's a good one at least.
Well, yeah, Wendigoon's good shit, but yeah, that's...
Shout out Wendigoon.
Yes.
So, Redoubt, what's your experience with...
What's my experience?
Yeah.
Well, I've watched the 1930 film. I just watched the 2022 film. I've known of the book, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so I've seen both movies now, and I have read the book 2 or 3 times. I think the last time was in high school, so it's been a few years, but...
Was
yes.
it required reading? Or?
Is there something wrong with the 1970 version?
No.
No.
Because we just never talked about it, and I was like wondering.
I think it
about
was made for television.
Oh, okay.
I've never seen it, so I can't really
And it's,
comment.
I have to check it out.
I think it's a British made for television one.
BBC.
Fucking Sherlock.
I don't know if it's BBC, but I think Donald Pleasance is in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth checking out. A Brucey bonus.
You gonna be a bonus?
Yeah, you know.
I don't know nothing, so I don't know.
Yeah, we got to start making that bonus contest.
Look, folks, it's been a long couple weeks.
And I haven't slept in a day at least.
Readout's been awake for like 3 days. He's literally been sleeping in a trench in his backyard getting ready for this review.
You can't see it, but I'm actually sitting in pure wool right now.
He-
Complete
Always
with
in
forge
costume.
cap.
No, that is actually dead-ass accurate. He is sitting in a forge cap. His wool. Yeah.
Has nothing to do with this review.
He's dressed kind of for the wrong war, but kind of for the right war, technically. But
There were trenches.
there were trenches, and also there were American troops in Union Blue during this First World War. So
That's a very story. That's a story for another day.
that is a story for another time and another
More on
place.
that later.
Yeah, more than that. Yeah, their place and our time. I forget, is it their time and our place or their place?
I think
and
it's
our
time and place. I think
So
from
I'm gonna go.
Streets of Fire.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on another tangent. So we talked about Streets of Fire a few weeks ago. Well,
It's kind of
a few
been
episodes
living rent
ago.
free in my head, honestly.
it
Street of Fire?
yeah, it does.
Very
It's great. It's great.
It is.
You go check out that reaction we had to. It was fantastic.
It's a
So
lot of fun.
It's
We-
linked up here.
I had to do an interview with a historical figure of the current American age, and I ended up choosing my father because I didn't have time to set up a proper interview.
Yeah.
And my dad is just one. He is one of the humans to live.
That is an accurate statement.
Be humans. So, and I said, I'm like, so what you guys typically watched in your downtime? Because I know you had like a movie library. And I'm like, well, he's like, we watch all different movies. I'm like, what was the more popular ones? And he just automatically went Streets of Fire. No, I'm dead serious. He like had to remind me, he's like, no, I'm not messing with you. So,
Damn.
I don't care what they say. It bombed at the box office, but it was really popular with the U.S. Navy in the 1980s.
I love with you. It's a fun action movie.
I
like,
loved
if
it.
nothing else, like
honestly, I'd watch it again.
We will probably.
we probably should at some point.
Yeah, we should introduce Mike to it and a few other people.
Oh my god, yes.
Mike Wazowski is yet to make an appearance, I think, on the proper podcast. Only in the
Only
on
the
Drunk
beta.
Around
Yeah, that's the
Sky.
beta version of the podcast.
Now he's currently camping out in the freshly waterproof tent for the LARP. So
He's camping?
Yeah, that was his plan. Assuming that the
Did
water.
you check in on him?
Well, here's the thing.
He's
So
in his yard, right?
Yeah, he was waterproof in the tent today, and like, you know, that chemical that you spray, it's pretty strong. And I was like, dude, you might want to like make sure this is fully aired out before you try sleeping.
give
in
it
it.
Oh my god, he's gonna be dead.
He probably
He's gonna
won't
get a
be.
gas attack.
It smelled like orange. It wasn't unpleasant, but like it was.
Our annual
it was
Mike
strong.
update program.
Orange or Agent Orange?
Wait, isn't that
Hopefully just orange, but yeah.
bro? I work at a factory, and like they clean things with like this orange smell, and I'm just picturing that like all night. I would lose so
Good
many
old
brain
Agent
cells.
Orange.
Yeah.
So let's talk about gas attacks. Let's talk about not fun stuff. Let's talk about the horrors of war. Let's talk about All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah. So
Let's give like the very general plot of both.
sure. So All Quiet on the Western Front. The book was originally written by Eric Maria Remarque in 1929. And it's interesting because it's part his memoir, but it's also part novel. So he pulled on a lot of his own experience from the First World War, but he also dramatized certain things, changed certain things. I don't think he ever fully stated like what was real and what wasn't, but he essentially made his own book based off his experiences. And it was a bestseller immediately in the post-war years. It was actually banned under the Third Reich for being anti-war,
Amongst other things.
Period. Anti-war.
And yeah, basically the book follows Paul, who's a young man who joins the German army in the First World War.
Paul Allen.
Not Paul Allen. Different Paul. Paul Brenner? Is that his last name?
Bronner.
It began with a B, right?
Yeah, Bronner.
Bronner, something like
Bronner.
that.
Paul Bronner.
We call him Paul.
Paul. Good old
the
Paul.
Actual spelling here.
Yeah, actual spelling here. That's great. But basically, so I think in the book, Paul and his classmates join up in 1915, I think. They join up fairly early.
After the teacher's like, if you don't join, you're a pussy.
Yeah, basically, their teacher's like, yeah, you guys should join. It's going to be great. And so
It's gonna
Paul...
be so much fun. So much. We're gonna have fun little talks, fun little playground experiences. We're gonna have all these fun things happening. You're gonna be a hero. LOL. Not that more than 90% of you are gonna die.
So Paul and his friends join up. They go through basic training.
War's gonna be over by Christmas.
Yeah, we're supposed to, well, every year it's supposed to be over by Christmas. But so they end up on the front line. A bunch of Paul's friends die. And I think about 3/4 of the way through the book, Paul actually gets to leave and he goes back home.
Ugh.
And it's honestly probably one of the most heartbreaking parts of the entire book is basically Paul's back home and he realizes that he can't relate to his parents, he can't relate to his friends. He actually swings by the school and like his teacher is giving the same speech that he gave them to like the new group of kids that are like in the school. You know, kind of like that whole cycle of war and getting people to like go and die for their country. And he gets very disillusioned. He goes back to the front and...
Also, he tells those kids, like, it sucks.
Yeah, but yeah, his teacher invites him in to talk and basically he's like...
Yeah, he has a red pill moment.
Yeah.
He's like, bro, don't do it.
His teacher's all offended. But also there's a very uncomfortable moment where like he's out at like a beer hall with his dad and like all of his dad's friends are there. And they're like, oh, have you been in hand-to-hand combat? And Paul's like, yeah, I'd rather not talk about that. And they're like, oh, like, and they roll out like this map of the Western Front.
This is how we're gonna win it.
They're like, we're gonna map it out, bitch.
They're like the classic like armchair warlord kind of people. And Paul's just sitting there like, all my friends are dead and I'm depressed and I'm sitting here with you assholes.
Y'all, you never seen this.
And the book famously ends with Paul. He's the last one of his class to still be alive. And he's in a trench on the Western Front. He sees a butterfly and reaches out of the trench, gets shot, dies instantly. And the entry in the official German High Command book for the day, because basically nothing happened, says all quiet on the Western Front. And that's the end of the book.
I didn't know that was the end.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Is Paul dies at the end of the book. And it's basically like, He died on like one of the days where nothing happened. He just happened to be in the wrong place, the wrong time, got shot, died. Book has been popular for years. It's been reprinted and retranslated. I don't even know how many times at this point. It's a great book if you haven't read it. I've read it a few times.
It's on my list now.
It's one of the few books I've actually bothered rereading. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. And I will say out of the two movies, the 1930s movie is very close to the book from what I remember. And again, it's been probably at least 6+ years since I read the book. The newer movie from 2022 from Netflix, it has the same characters as the original book, and it has some of the same themes, but it's very much its own beast. Like, a lot of the plot points are different. A lot of like what we're seeing is very different. But the whole anti-war message is still very much intact, I would say, out of the two.
All right, so yeah, like Humble Collector Connor over here said, yeah, the 1930 version is pretty straight up from what the synopsis of the book is. I'm sure there were any noticeable deviations.
So again, it's been so long since I read the book. But from what I remember, the movie was pretty darn close to what the book was for the 1930 version.
Now, I will say when me and Connor sat down to watch the 30s version, we were both a little unsure because we both said, this is like the oldest film we've ever watched. Or one of the older films we've ever watched. Not counting like archival footage, like a proper movie. And All Quiet on the Western Front was only made a few years after the Academy Awards had come into existence, after like movie awards had become a thing. It had only come into existence after having sound in movies was a regular thing now. If you go into and unfortunately I don't remember a lot of the cast lists, it's just most of them we're not familiar with, because a lot of the cast in this, they primarily starred in silent films. This was one of their first, if not their only, talkie performance.
Well, and if I remember correctly, a lot of the extras are actually vets from World War I.
Yeah, according to Windigoon, like they were the ones who showed him how to like barbed wire the area and how to march and things like that.
So when we sat down, I was kind of expecting this to be really hokey. I mean, that's why I never really can watch anything like pre-1970. Things can just tend to be really hokey.
It was shockingly good.
Yes, I was just in awe. Like we were like, oh my god, this is like not just a coherent. This is like watching the real archive footage.
I'm a smooth brain mofo. Like I'm not smart. And I was entertained the whole time. That's very hard for a movie over 2 hours to get me in.
There was one point where I turned to Redoubt. It was right after the famous like trench attack scene where the French charged the German line. There's some hand-to-hand combat. But I remember vividly turning to Redoubt and being like, that is the best depiction of World War I combat I think I've ever seen. And that's the scary thing about the 1930 movie is it looks like archival footage. Because it's in black and white, it's just kind of there. Like, it's very familiar to me, at least, from all the research that I've done throughout the years on World War I and World War II. Like, it looks exactly like original period
and the feel of it, some of these sequences, they're massive.
Oh, yeah. There's hundreds of actors on screen. You know, hundreds of extras charging the trench.
Some of the scenes they filmed in 1930 were, like, insane.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's what I was just blown away by. I'll say there are things that definitely tell you it's of the time. It definitely has it's like vestiges of stage play where scene starts, scene ends.
And the dialogue's definitely clunky in certain places.
Yeah. Now, I will say the best character in the 1930s version, and arguably the best character in both of them, is Kat.
Period!
Yeah, Kat's
I think it's full last name Kaczynski.
Kaczynski.
I think everyone who knows the story is like, Kat.
Well, in the 1930 version, I forget the actor's name, but he portrays him like it's this freaking like New York taxi driver.
Hey, I'm walking here. Yeah.
It surprisingly works.
It does. Yeah.
I mean, not for German, but
the actor is Louis Volheim.
Oh, thank you.
Volheim.
Something like that.
But yeah, he does a great job, albeit it is an absolute not German depiction. They just happen to be cosplaying as Germans. I will say that about this movie. All the actors are just cosplay. It very well cosplay, but they're cosplaying.
Well,
because they like speak in English, so like...
there's no accent, which sometimes when you get into that situation where you have actors that are not speaking the language, it's sometimes just better just to have them just speak regularly, use their regular
Yeah.
accents.
I agree.
We watched a similar film, me and Humble Collector did a few weeks ago, called Death of Stalin, and it's all in English, but they kind of went in knowing that, so they kind of hammed up everybody's accents, not in terms of they were trying to do Russian accents, but rather they kept their English, Welsh, Irish, Scot accents.
It was actually very funny.
Yeah, to kind of differentiate the different parts of the Soviet Union. So in that sense, it works. And so in this sense, for the 1930 film, it's fine. I'm not going to hold issues.
Oh my god.
And I guess for the collectors out there like myself, these early like 1920s, 30s, 40s war movies, everything you're seeing on screen is original. Like all the uniforms, all the equipment, that is all
surplus.
That's all World War I surplus. It's fascinating. That's one of the reasons that a lot of these war movies have not aged well for various reasons, but this one has. Like, I would actually genuinely sit down in my free time and watch this again if I had the opportunity to.
This was in an age where war films, I mean, it's still like this today, but especially in the infancy of the motion picture, where war films were glam pieces, big glam pieces. Cough, cough, Birth of a Nation. Cough, cough.
We don't talk about that one.
Oh, someday I'm gonna have to.
Are we gonna talk about that on the podcast?
Not on here.
Yeah.
I'll slay that on my own terms. Anyways, but this
if you need
film,
a side gunner for that, let me know.
I will let you know. I don't need many. Probably.
We could do Birth of a Nation and Triumph of the Wolves at the same time.
I don't know what the fuck either of those.
So Birth of Nation's the KKK propaganda film.
Oh.
And Triumph of the Wolves is literally just about like one of the Nazi party rallies in Nuremberg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Does not sound like a fun time.
Not
I have that one on
Considering
DVD,
Birth
actually.
of a Nation's 3 hours long. Not a fun
Huh.
time. And this was in 1915.
See,
It's also the first.
3 hours long doesn't affect me anymore because I watched John Wick 4 yesterday.
Yes, but this
and
is
I
a
was like
3-hour
fucking
silent
stupid.
film.
It's a
Silent
3-hour
film,
silent
okay.
film. It's also the first movie shown at the White House by good old Woody Wilson.
Wilson!
Bastard. Do with that what you will.
So I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
But
If I was in the White House, the first thing they'd show is like fucking.
Tusk.
No! I think the first thing they show is like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something like that.
I'm sure it's already
Or
been
Lord
shown.
of the Rings, but like
Shown in private.
Yeah.
nothing like weird.
Nothing like KKK propaganda.
Nah, personally, not my thing.
I think it's not most people's thing. I think that's fair.
No,
Hopefully.
so, the point
We'll
being,
break and read out.
yes, I am far past broken tonight, folks. 1930s,
Mo.
All Quiet on the Western Front, defies the typical war film of the period.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like they went in there like, we are making a film about let's not fight another world war. We're going to show you the horrors of it. Unfortunately, the good news it made bank, and everybody did go to see it. The bad news is nobody learned a lesson.
And also, a lot of it was banned a lot, and people
Yes.
were like really
Yeah.
upset that it
Well,
was
especially
The
in
banned.
book
Germany.
and the movie.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, anti-war, and it's not showing us in good light.
Well, the funny thing when it comes to like German World War I memoirs, the two like dichotomies I always talk about: All Quiet by Maria Remarque, and then you have Storm of Steel by Ernst Jünger.
Mm-hmm.
Both of which are great books. But essentially, All's Quiet's very much like, yeah, war's bad, and like we shouldn't fight each other. And meanwhile, Storm of Steel is very much like, war kind of sucks, but it's also kind of based. Like, Ernst was an officer, and he served through multiple years of the war. And his memoir is basically just like, yeah, so I went to this officer's dugout, and I drank 2 bottles of wine, and then I walked over to this other officer's dugout, and I hung out with him for a couple hours, and Private so-and-so and Corporal so-and-so died, and then we charged this British trench. It literally just reads like a diary of like, hey, we did this thing, and then we drank, and then we charged this enemy trench, then we drank, and then
Another homies there like, my friends died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Ernst Jünger, because his book was very much not anti-war, was more favorably looked upon when the Third Reich came into power, unlike Maria Remarque's book. In fact, Ernst Jünger actually served in the German military during World War II in like a office role, basically. He ended up in France after the German conquest, and he ended up being forced out of the military after the July of 1944 attempt on Hitler's life. Because he got implicated, but he didn't actually do anything, and the Nazis were afraid to kill him because he's kind of a national hero. So they just forced him into retirement. But yeah, Ernst Jünger didn't die till 1998. He lived for a very long time. Yeah. Yeah, he became like a philosophy
Oh,
professor, if I remember
100.
correctly.
A philosophy professor.
Yeah.
Philosophy on what?
It's just philosophy in general. I have no idea.
We chilling, guys. That's the.
But he became a university professor.
That's interesting.
I will say my biggest knock, I mean, and you'll support me on this, my biggest knock I had for the 1930s film, the actor that was playing Paul.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe his
I'm interested.
bland accent, his bland rating. It was just so... Oh, have you ever watched the Black Cauldron?
Yes.
Do you know the main character in the Black Cauldron?
I can't remember his name, but I know him.
He's one of the whiniest characters Disney ever created. That's Paul in the 1930 film. That's how he speaks.
Do you think that was on purpose?
Well, he's Normiecore, hashtag.
Well, do you think that they made Paul as boring as possible so people could...
It's not that he's boring.
Well, but
it's
it's like...
the way
he goes on these soliloquies that are just like...
I mean, me too, bro.
This isn't happening. It breaks my... It breaks the reality. It breaks the realism when he starts talking.
Well, because nobody talks like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the biggest problem for me, at least for the 1930 version. Not just Paul, but a lot of people. Their dialogue is very much ripped right from the book. Mm. And here's the thing. Dialogue that works great in books does not always work great in movies.
Period.
Because there's a big difference between reading something and saying it.
Writings are very different, too.
Yeah, writing's very different. But there was multiple points where, like, not even just Paul, but other characters like Kat and I think one of their officers at one point has this long diatribe. But it's just like, dude, nobody talks like this.
Everybody, I think, actually has a long talking segment. Every major character.
Yeah.
See, I realize people don't talk like they did in movies until, like, very recently.
I mean, I think one-liners like the best of them, but, like, you know.
Yeah, like, I used to, like, freaking, like, watch TV shows being like, that's how people talk, and I would talk like that, and everyone's like, what's wrong with you?
And also, in many cases, people nowadays we have an issue where people try to hype up the horror and like event. Which, just to be fair, these horrifying events happen, but they'll make people so panic stricken, and then you listen to like the actual recording from some of these events, and they're
not.
No, like for instance, Apollo 13. For the record, a very good depiction of what went on that moon mission. But the dialogue is too hyper compared to the real life dialogue.
They're told to like ham it up, and then they do it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that, like a lot of like these horrifying events that happen, and you see them depicted in the movies, and everybody's just going shit, like, and then you actually listen to the real recordings, and everybody's like, don't get me wrong, you can tell that they're panicked, but not.
They're still being professional. They're very much like going through
a horrific event, and you're just like, yeah, this is going on.
This is fine.
Because like me.
What's that mean?
It's very.
It's the
like,
dog with the flames.
The human way I think to do it is just like being like, hey, help.
Well, there's a level of dissociation you almost have to.
Oh yeah.
Where it's very much like I have my training, and like I'm just gonna go through the motions because like this is what I've been trained to do.
But then we gotta move to like.
Yeah. And that's definitely become an issue today in most based on a true story movies.
Well, let's be real here. Based on a true story means shit.
Based on true story means these people have these same names.
Yeah, there was this thing that happened, and this guy with the same name was involved, but everything else is different.
The Conjuring.
You mean Denzel Washington didn't stop that train? Darn.
Basically, any horror movie based on the Warrens' investigations.
Okay, we're eventually gonna have to talk about the Warrens because fuck them.
Yeah, I got a few things to say about the Warrens.
Good. That'll be a long one.
And about the
I just listened to the Wendy Goons.
And about modern
horror.
Modern horror, modern ghost hunting.
Modern everything.
Honestly, yeah.
It's mood.
I'm the guy that dragged you into talking about the Wall for 6 hours.
We mostly talked about Evangelion for 6 hours.
It was one of the most long and memorable nights of my life, honestly.
It's one of the only times in my life I've gone into third person mode. That was weird.
We were all scarred.
Where I was actually like out of my seat just watching over my shoulder.
We are scarred.
Yeah.
Those two, Evangelion, the Wall.
No one thought it would take that long.
We're going to have to get some campaign medals for that one.
We do.
I survived the Wall.
That's what we've been saying today.
What's it gonna
we need
be
campaign
like freaking
medals.
like one of the angels just like I survived.
Yeah, so
fucking Rami Ellis.
Yeah. That'd be so funny. Christmas ideas.
Now, before we lose the plot, don't worry, I don't have a problem losing the plot. Let's talk about the 2022 film, which we should point out the 1930s is about German soldiers, but it's in English. The 2022 version is about German soldiers, and it's in German.
It's great.
Woo, woo,
Because
woo,
here's the
woo.
thing.
We did it.
I know there's the very contentious sub versus dub debate.
Ugh.
But in my opinion, if you have the ability to watch a movie or TV show, whatever, in its original language with subtitles, just do it.
And
Like,
people always act like, oh, I don't want to watch a foreign film, like for English audience. I don't want to watch a foreign film. But I'm like, you do realize Germany's produced so far like three of the most famous war films that are equally popular in the United States.
Das Boot.
Das Boot, Stalingrad, and Downfall.
And funnily enough, I have not seen any of them.
I
Yes.
literally have not heard of them.
So, Das Boot, submarine movie. Stalingrad's about the Battle of Stalingrad, which was one of the largest battles in human history. And Downfall's about the last days in Berlin at the end of the Third Reich.
You've seen...
You've seen the meme with
Okay.
Hitler going, 99999.
Yes,
Yeah,
I have.
that's from that movie.
No, 9999, I think that's
Oh.
Hitler from Inglourious
I just
Basterds.
wanna-
The other one, no, the from Downfall, the Hitler, it's a template used for whenever Hitler freaks out over.
Oh, that's one where he takes his glasses off and he yells
Yeah.
at his generals. Yeah.
Yeah, because 9999, he got the cape because it's Tarantino.
Oh, that's right.
Can I just give my 2 cents about dub versus sub?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because I am, as someone with a small brain, small attention span, I always say I like dubs. But then I watch a sub, like the movie we just watched, and I don't remember it's in sub. I just remember
Oh, yeah,
it
same.
happened. It's like
Yeah.
it's like my brain just is like, oh yeah, you understood what they were saying.
I've always felt it's one thing. At the end of the day, I'm one of them. I said, pick whichever one you want to. I'm never going to judge. Personally, I will normally default to a subbed version over dub, just because that's how it was originally intended to be heard.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to animation, if you got the right voice cast, regardless of the language, if it's done well, I think you can make it work.
Yeah.
When it comes to live action, it's a little more difficult.
I don't
because of
like
lip
watching the
syncing.
mouth not match up with the
Yeah.
words.
Well,
freaks me
it
out.
helps with German versus like Japanese, for example, with anime, because German shares a lot of words with English, and a
As
lot
we
of the
learned.
words are similar. It's weird for me because I'm not a good example of this because I know a lot of German words. I can't speak German. Don't play German on TV or anything like that.
You
But
don't?
like, I can pick words out of a sentence and be like, okay, I know what that means. I know what that means. Because there was a joke in the most recent All Quiet movie where the guy said something about like, oh, like this kid went into his teacher and said, oh, my father's a captain in Nazareth, you know. And then his teacher's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Go talk to your dad again. He comes back and he's like, oh, my dad said he had the clap in the lazaret, you know. Which basically his dad had an STD in the field hospital.
That's the truth.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Lazaret's
That's funny.
hospital.
That's funny.
It'd be Field Lazaret for.
But for
field
whatever
hospital.
reason, they didn't translate.
They didn't translate the word Lazaret, so I was the only one in our group laughing because for those of you who don't follow my channel, I translate a lot of German funeral notices, and a lot of them reference field
It
hospitals
just
or
sounds like
hospitals.
somebody messed up at Netflix.
Well, but it
I
doesn't
don't
make
know.
sense otherwise.
Yeah, I think that they were just like, oh, because the words in German.
Yeah,
match
because
up,
Nazareth,
so
So it was
Lazaret.
probably capitalized.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But like, I thought that joke was hilarious, but I was the only one because I just kind of knew.
You're a nerd.
Like some nerd.
Nerd alert.
But no, I appreciated that, and it's all the other movies I'm gonna watch eventually. They're on my list. We'll get there.
What movies? The ones from Germany?
Stalingrad,
Das Boot, Stalingrad, and Downfall. Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yes, you'll watch Downfall purely for the meme. They understand where the meme came from.
Yeah. Well, because what I'm pretty sure that movie's based off the diary of one of Hitler's last secretaries,
Yes.
if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was actually in the bunker at the end of the war, like right
The one
before.
where he...
Yeah,
Yeah.
right before Hitler committed not alive. Yeah.
And we've seen the booth that, or not the booth, we've seen the stool that reportedly was in the room that he not alive in.
We have?
No, not you.
Oh.
You've yet to go on one of our Gettysburg.
I have
Wait, was
left
that?
out.
Wait, hold on. Was the stool in the Gettysburg Military History Museum?
I don't think it's the stool that he not alive upon, but it was in the room and supposedly has blood samples on it.
Woo!
Was it the Battlefield Military Museum?
No,
No?
it was in the other one.
Oh, the Gettysburg History
Yeah,
Museum?
the good one.
Oh, the good one. Okay, well, I trust that
The
one.
one I'm not scared of.
Yeah.
Is that the one
That's a whole other
The one that
tangent.
that's a
doesn't
whole
sell
other tangent.
chocolate?
Well, I was like, 'cause I'm pretty sure Hitler...
No, we're going
No.
down the rabbit hole too
Well,
far.
I'm
It's
pretty
turned
sure
into an abyss.
Hitler shot himself on his couch, if I remember correctly.
Me. Anyway.
Because what? They had the cyanide, they tested it on his dog Blondie,
They tested it on a dog?
Yeah, the dog died. And then
We live here now, apparently.
Ava and Hitler both took cyanide. Ava died from the cyanide. Hitler either didn't let the cyanide work or thought it wasn't working, and then he pulled out his handgun and shot himself. And that's how Hitler died.
Touch the freckle.
Unless you're one of those conspiracy theorists that thinks that he escaped to Argentina, because there's a lot of those around.
People be like, I saw a picture.
So, what is that? 2022. All quiet in the Western Front.
Yes.
So, thoughts?
I really enjoyed it. Here's the thing: it's hard to compare it to the 1930s version because the 2022 version departs vastly from the book.
Yes. The big difference is where the book in the 30s film is kind of telling this story over several years. Even though they don't outright say it, you can get the sense that time is elapsing between the scenes. Like the scenes are more vignettes of the character's time during the First World War, where this expressly states what time it is, where you're located.
It's like 18 months later.
Yeah, it starts in 1917, and then fast forwards to the very end of the war in November of 1918. And most of the 2/3 of the film are set in the final week of the war.
Yeah. And that's very different from the books. I know Paul dies in the book in 1918, but it's several months before the war ends.
Yeah, it's kind of unspecified.
Yeah, but it's definitely not like the day the war ends.
Man, it's just depressing.
But basically, that's one of the weird things. So this movie, as far as like the equipment and like the actual like militaria that's in the movie is very accurate, but they made a couple weird changes that I can't really explain. Like one, for example, so there's like a subplot where we're following like the German delegation that's like signing the treaty at Versailles at the end of the war, basically being like, hey, we're gonna like stop fighting on November 11th, 1918, at the 11th hour, 11/11/11.
Angel numbers, #blessed.
Yeah, because obviously
Oh my
the German
gosh,
delegation and the French delegation were a bunch of Zodiac girls. So that whole subplot's going on, but then like the German like general that's in charge of like Paul's section of the front is like, I know it's the last day of the war, but we're gonna charge the Allied lines because fuck it, basically. Because he's got some weird daddy issues where his dad was a veteran of like the Franco-Prussian War.
Yeah, he got daddy issues.
And during the Franco-Prussian War, they took Paris, but they're not taking Paris this time, so he's got like some angst going on. But yeah, so they end up charging the French lines at the end of the war, and Paul unfortunately gets bayoneted and dies quite literally like 2 minutes after the war ends in 1918.
Yeah.
Which is depressing as hell.
Oh my God.
And where in the 1930s film, and again in the book, you get to know the main cast of characters. There's more than just two characters. You know, it's like 4 or 5. Don't get me wrong, they all die off eventually. And the two main characters of all the versions is Paul and Katz. Those are the two pillars of the whole what is All Quiet on the Western Front. Those are your pillars. Yeah. But in this one, they kill off a good chunk of Paul's classmates pretty early on.
Only without mentioning it, honestly.
Only the one who I forget his name, but we will call him Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield looking dude.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield. He's the other classmate you get to know.
Yeah, he's the only one that survives past like their first few days on the front.
He has a few like solo, like.
He has a few really good moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he Andrew Garfield, German Andrew Garfield. He is so desperate for a woman.
German Garfield.
So desperate. So they're going to investigate what happened to this company of new recruits because they're supposed to come and relieve them. So they go back to the rear, and I'm very confused because they go back to this train station. There's nobody. I get why later on, but I still feel there should have been something. I'm like, there's just this. It feels like a video game level, like in Call of Duty. It's just like, where is everybody? There should be, and again, that's a thing that the 30s film I think does very well. Everything feels lived in. There's always commotions. Where this definitely feels like, wait, where's everybody at? Like there should be stuff happening here. It's kind of like Nolan's Dunkirk. Very accurate, but
very empty.
Yes, because you don't want to use so much CGI. Anyways, I'm gonna have myself. So Andrew Garfield, German Andrew Garfield, is wandering around this bombed out train station. He comes up with this poster of like a French couple, and then rips off the woman's side of it, and that is his waifu for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, he there is a point in the movie where he makes out with that poster.
And then he's like, "You jealous?"
Yeah, he turns to Paul. He's like,
He literally does, and Paul's like, "What the fuck?"
Paul's like, "Nah, I ain't."
I've seen some shits, but come on.
War and waifus. Name a more iconic duo. Wait.
W squared.
Yep. You know, German Andrew Garfield got half of a French poster. The Russians got O2.
Yeah, the
Body
Russians got body pillows on the freaking Ukraine front.
I mean,
those are artifacts now.
I don't blame him, but could they
I'd
have
buy
better
one.
taste, please?
Yeah.
That's Russia. They don't have better taste.
No.
They don't got isekai, I guess.
Well, yeah, they banned isekai in Russia because they were afraid of young Russians killing themselves because life sucks there.
Mood.
We're not making this up.
No, that's
for
no,
real,
like
guys.
legit, like Konosuba and a bunch of other popular isekais banned in Russia because they were afraid that young people kill themselves.
They ain't
for a
got
better life.
ReZero.
Which is probably one of the best isekais of our generation,
for
but
real.
whatever. Let's change it.
So yeah, we got German Andrew Garfield. He's a character, but yeah, it's
Oh, it is death. Oh man.
Oh my god. Ugh.
yeah. So I will
sad.
say for like the first half of the movie, and I've heard hype for it, like, oh my god, this is so.
Yeah.
This is one of the best war films ever come out.
I heard a lot of this is like a gore film. Like you're gonna see people suffering.
So
gory
I'm
and
like,
gore
we're like,
movie.
where's? I mean, and now there's a lot of horrifying imagery in the first half,
It's
but
not
nothing.
gore though.
Well, yeah, and gore just creates disgust. It doesn't necessarily create horror.
Yeah.
Unless you have the certain
I
right
know, but I was told it
context.
was like very gory. You know. Like,
So, well, then there's a sequence where the Germans attack one of the French trenches, and they actually get in the trench. They succeeded, and we have a pretty funny sequence where they break into it must have been an officer's mess. Katz and Paul and Andrew Garfield's there, and they're like, "Yeah, sure, let's eat. Why not?"
Yeah, because there's this French dugout that's full of like bread and there's
Mm-hmm.
cheese, there's bottles of wine, and meanwhile the Germans are starving, so they're like, "Oh shit, this food."
they start eating.
And
Let's
to
start
enjoy it.
eating.
So while they're eating, the ground starts rumbling.
And that's when the Saint Germains show up.
Yes. So this may be the first film to
Feature the Saint Germain,
Yes.
per my understanding. So the Saint Germain was a French tank that was developed in 1917. I think they only made about like 400 of them. And side note, for those of you who played Battlefield 1, which is one of the greatest World War I games ever made, that was my favorite tank in the entire game. Loved it, played it many times. But basically, these tanks roll up, and like Paul and his friends have no freaking clue what to do about this. Because well, some of them do, but we'll get to that in a minute. But basically, they're like shooting at these tanks. Obviously, nothing's happening because they're just shooting normal rifles at tanks. And then the tanks actually start rolling over the trench that they're in. And we actually do see somebody get run over by a tank, which is pretty graphic.
Brutal.
But also, when the tanks are actually like dipping down into the trenches, they have these side-mounted machine guns. They're just mowing people down. There's a point eventually when the tanks pass them, and Paul and the other couple of survivors, they're actually stuck between the German tanks and the advancing French infantry, or the French tanks, the French infantry, and they actually charge out of the trench after the tanks. And I think Katz is the one who actually disables the one tank, if I remember correctly.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but basically he sticks a grenade in the track to disable the tank.
Which makes us think, okay, they've done this before.
Yeah,
Which
well,
makes us interested. Don't be wrong, you'd be scared shitless too if you saw the tanks rolling up. But also, they clearly know some of them at least know how to handle them.
Yeah. And by this point in the war, tanks are definitely not like a common thing, but it's definitely something that a German unit that's been on the front lines long enough, like Paul's would have been, has probably seen tanks a few times.
But
like,
if the tanks weren't bad enough,
yeah, if the tanks were bad enough, then the French show up with flamethrowers. And just start burning all the Germans that are left in the French
war
trenches.
crimes left and right.
War crimes left and right. They keep advancing. And so Paul and Katz finish off the tank crew. This one Saint Germain. And, you know, the German soldiers are just retreating back to their lines at this point. There's French flamethrowers everywhere. And then Garfield's character stays behind, hiding in cover on one of the tanks while Paul and the rest of them keep going. And basically, Garfield and a couple other German soldiers try to surrender, and the French just fucking kill all of them.
They flamethrower.
They
them?
flamethrower Garfield.
And then watch as they burn alive.
Yeah, Garfield is lit on fire, and he's literally crawling on the ground for a good 15-20 seconds before a French soldier finally walks up and shoots him through the head with his rifle. Which has an effect on Paul, as you can imagine. Paul's
Oh my
definitely...
god, watch one of your best friends.
One of your
burn
last good
alive.
friends from your school days die in front of you horribly. And that's one of the things this movie does really well, is it shows like all the advancements in technology that were made during World War I just to fucking kill people, and shows how brutal everything was.
There was a definite emphasis on machines in this movie. The war machine.
Yeah.
Because we open, the film starts basically with a montage of showing these clothes from deceased German soldiers being torn off their bodies, being sewn back together, being washed and everything, and then being sent to new recruits.
Which is the thing that happened.
Yeah, absolutely true. And it is implied in the 1930s film. Like, it takes time. Yeah, it takes time for them to put two and two together what's happening, where this film, the big difference, the 1930s film, I think, is far more subtle, where the 2022 one is smacking you over the head. War is bad. The war machine is real.
War is bad, okay?
So much to the point that the movie's soundtrack, what sound music we get...
It has these weird, like, Inception...
Yeah.
We know Germans love their electric music, but, like... Yeah. So it was like...
It felt very over the top.
Yeah. It was just show up random singles. And there ain't much else to the soundtrack.
No, the soundtrack's very subtle throughout most of the movie.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
So when you just start having bong come in, it's like... I'm half expecting the choir from Akira to show up.
For real.
I'm waiting for a freaking mech to walk over the bridge.
I honestly was.
Like, yeah.
I mean, the tanks are close enough, I guess.
Yeah, the Saints Romands do kind of slap a little bit.
So, yeah. And now, what is you had a certain, a comparatively minor detail that threw us off the rails.
Oh my gosh. So, at one point, during the subplot with, like, the German negotiation team talking to the French, one of the Germans talks about how they're running out of food and they're going to get overwhelmed by the Bolsheviks. So, that blew my mind because the movie, as far as, like, the equipment and everything goes, is very accurate. Like, they obviously did a ton of research. But then, why the fuck are you talking about the Bolsheviks? So, for those of you who don't know, basically, the Germans brought Lenin out of exile in Switzerland and said, hey, you know that whole communism thing you got going on? Like, what if we give you a bunch of money and send you back to Russia so you can start, like, a communist coup? And Lenin's like, you know what, that sounds pretty good. And so they send Lenin back to Russia. And by this point, Russia's suffering a lot of issues. There's actually pretty big discontent in the military at this point. And so when the Red Revolution basically starts in Russia, a huge chunk of the army basically decides, yeah, we're not fighting anymore. And so that leads to the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which is basically where the Bolsheviks say, hey, like, we got to deal with some shit here because there's still some people that are supporting the Tsar that we got to go kill. So basically because of that, we're pulling out of the war. And so at that point, Russia and the Soviets pull out of the war, and Germany takes all of these divisions they had on the Eastern Front and sends them back to the West. This is one of these weird moments where there's probably an alternate timeline out there where the Germans are actually able to make an advance and end the war that doesn't end up happening on our timeline. But it's weird to see a German general be like, oh yeah, the Bolsheviks are going to bleed us dry. It's like, well, they're not even in the war at this point. Yeah, they're dealing with this whole civil war between the Red and White armies. They got the whole Czech Legion just, like, gallivanting through their territory, which is a completely different, like, side tangent.
You started, like, freaking out. I'm like, what are you freaking out about?
Well, it's such a blatant problem. I don't understand how the movie can be that well researched and still make that weird error.
It's not you.
But it's a major plot point. Like,
sometimes when you hyper focus on the small details, you can miss the big ones.
That's fair. Is it the autism?
It's the autism.
But my whole thing is, like, the movie's very well researched. All the uniforms, all the equipment are very accurate. Like, a lot of the stuff is good.
It's honestly, between the two, I can't say which one's better visually.
Yeah, it's weird because they're so different. It's hard to compare the two. Because as far as, like, a black and white movie filmed in the 30s goes,
it was like high tech, like,
yeah, very high tech, very accurate. Again, because they're using surplus equipment, can't get more real than that.
And, like, actual veterans.
Yeah, and actual veterans. And then you get to the modern 2022 movie, which looks gorgeous in color.
Lots of contrast.
It kept coming to my mind. There was a book I read about World War I a long time ago, and the title of it was The Beauty and the Sorrow. And that applies this movie to a T. Where, like, the movie's gorgeous, but it's also very depressing. is like you have these scenes where Paul basically like survives something he shouldn't have, and he's just standing there, and you have like no man's land or the trench or whatever behind him,
and like these pretty like these blue shades. And,
you have all these shades and like and it's gorgeous. But yeah, I don't understand why they were talking about the Bolsheviks.
I don't either.
Yeah, that was a weird nerd tangent that I had to go on.
So, well, between the two films, let's see what you guys think. Between
honestly,
between 1930 and 2022, which one reigns slightly supreme? Because let's just be fair, I think both of them are equally great.
Both are great for
I'm gonna go back and watch them, but from what I've heard, the 1930s one is more up my alley.
Yeah, for the scenes that you've seen.
From the scenes I've seen, yeah. Because they had like the freaking like hands on the barbed wire.
Oh yeah, and the French soldier.
And like in the 2022 version, they had like kind of a guy with like no hands, and it's like kind of like a reference, I guess.
I would think so, yeah.
But I kind of feel like it was closer to the actual thing that happened and had people that were actually there, so there might be more accuracy or more like you can feel it in the movie how they, the emotions that come forth.
Well, it's weird. It's hard with the 2022 movie too because as far as I'm aware, there was not a German attempt at a last-ditch like counterattack on the morning of November 11th. As far as I'm aware, I never heard of one, never seen one. In fact, actually, the last American casualty of World War I, I have his name here. If I pull it up on my notes.
Oh, we mean notes, we mean your phone.
Yeah, Henry Gunther. So Gunther, I believe he's originally a sergeant, but basically he, a couple months before the war ended, wrote a letter back to a friend of his back in the U.S. and said, hey, like the war's going to end soon, don't bother joining up. And he got in trouble because that was like anti-war, anti-American sentiment, so they bumped him down from a sergeant to a private. And basically after a couple months of dealing with that, on the morning of November 11th, he decided that he was going to charge the German trenches and try to regain some of his honor. And the Germans tried to wave him off, and him and a couple other Americans decided they wanted to keep going. And so Gunther was shot and killed at 10:59 a.m., November 11th, 1918.
Oh, that's so depressing.
And a lot of people that I've seen talk about that have chalked his death up to a suicide, basically, where he decided that he was going to just either do something or die, and he ended up dying.
Okay, so like, I'm a big Lord of the Rings guy, and as I was watching this, I'm not a war guy, so like I didn't like think of it, but I'm like, this is like very Lord of the Rings-esque, because you think about Frodo when he goes back to the Shire and he's like, I can't live here anymore.
Yeah.
So he leaves, and it reminded me a lot of that.
Yeah, well, we talked about that a little bit while the movie was going on. Basically, Tolkien was always very adamant that there's no allegory in Lord of the Rings.
But like subconsciously.
Which, like, you read it and you're like, dude, are you sure? the freaking trench bogs, whatever.
The death bogs.
Yeah, the death bogs, and there's definitely some World War I stuff going on there.
Yeah, but it's like, I feel like Lord of the Rings did a really good job about like being like, yeah, you saved the world, but you really can't live in it at this point.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised the cinematographer for the 2022 film took a few pages from Peter Jackson's trilogy.
Yeah, I was watching it. Listen, I know nothing about World War I. I'm like, this kind of reminds me of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I will say out of the two films,
I never tattooed, so I know what I'm talking about.
It's hard, because if I wanted to watch a movie version of All Quiet, the 1930s version is like the version. It's close to the book. It has a lot of the same scenes. As far as the equipment, everything is very accurate. There's a lot that I liked in the 2022 version, but I still think I gotta go with the 30s version.
It was a great film.
I feel like that makes me sound like really like content.
No.
Yeah, whatever the word
I
is.
haven't even seen the 1930s version. I'm like, I like that one better.
Yeah, nothing against the 2022 version.
It was
it's
mostly
great.
the ending for me.
I would watch it again, 100%. I would sit down and watch it again, but like the 1930s version is definitely like probably out of the two of them my favorite.
I believe the 2022 film does a wonderful depiction of the brutality of World War I, where the 1930 film delivers a much better anti-war message.
Oh yeah, I get that.
There's no villains in all in the 1930s film. We have clear villains in this 2022 one. You know, what would it call Dr. Robotnik up there in the captured chateau.
Homie's like, I want.
Yeah.
We have till 11 a.m. Go fucking die.
One last ditch of salt, boys. We're gonna capture the field.
There's some, and and it does happen. I mean, it always boil down to a few privileged individuals, basically. Instead of throwing punches, they're throwing hundreds of thousands of people at each other, all for a piece of land or a piece of
be like
money.
Mindful of it, because you're a douchebag.
Who was the one member of the German delegation for the surrender? Was freaking like Hellsdorf or whatever.
His name was Hellsdorf. Fucking Hellsdorf.
The super villain, I swear.
Might as well have brought Herr Kindersmasher, you know?
Yeah.
Can we talk about the endings, though?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the ending for the 2022 version, like, I see what it was trying to do, but it didn't impact me as much as the 1930s ending.
It was too cinematic.
It was. Because the 1930s version with him reaching for the butterfly and then dying.
That's it.
Like,
that's it.
That
it's a whimper.
Causes an inside, like, hurt, like, pain, heartbreak reaction that the newest one, like, you see him, like, dying, but you don't see him die, and also there's no butterfly, and he's just, like, sitting there.
Yeah.
And
and it's hard with the modern version, too, because, like, I think with the 1930 version, it's like, he just dies. Like, there's no time for regret,
he's reaching for a butterfly, which is the freaking symbol of transformation, of, like, evolution.
Yeah, but, like, there's no time for him to, like, have a reflection or, like, a last word or whatever. He just dies. And the 22 version, he gets bayoneted through through his chest.
And he walks.
And, like, literally the guy takes the bayonet out and is walking away, and, like, they get the order, and they're like, oh, the war's over, blowing all their whistles and everything. And so Paul gets a chance to actually walk out of the bunker and basically just dies in the trench there. But, like, he has a couple minutes where he's actually, like, alive and walking around at the end of the war before he, like, keels over.
Yeah, but, like, you see a kid taking his dog tag.
Yeah, which is a callback to the beginning of the movie, where Paul is actually ordered to start collecting people's dog tags.
I don't mind the ending. It's a good ending.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But I, prefer the other one.
But it's hard, because the original version of All Quiet, where it's all, like, the brutality and, like, pointlessness of war, like, it makes perfect sense that Paul dies unceremoniously at the end of the book.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense that Paul just gets shot at the end of the movie, and, like, there's no grandstanding or, like, last words or, like, what. He's dead.
Yeah.
But, like, it felt kind of cheap in the 22 version, where Paul gets bayoneted through the back, and he's able to walk around.
You don't even see who bayoneted him, I don't think.
No, the guy bayonets him and then just walks away through the door. And you see the French officer that Paul was fighting originally kind of just look at him and then just turn around and walk away. But there's not... It's hard, because I feel like there's definitely impactfulness for somebody getting mortally wounded and having a chance to do, like, a last act or say a last word. But there's something equally powerful in a character you've been following the entire movie dying and not having a chance to do anything about it.
10th Doctor over there on his never-ending farewell tour.
But, like, I feel like that's something that the book and the 1930s film did very well, is basically Paul's just a cog in the machine. He's just one soldier. He's lived through a lot, but...
And at the end, he, like, realizes that.
Yeah. But that's the thing. In the era of mechanized warfare, is Paul's just a cog in the machine, and no matter how much he's lived through, no matter how much people have sacrificed to get him to where he is, he's still just as vulnerable as anybody else, and he dies. And the 22 version tries to give Paul a little bit of extra time and grace to, like, live.
I don't think he did it very well, though.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of get what they were gonna do, but, like...
Well, it's a callback to the beginning of the movie.
His death didn't hit me as hard as it should have, I feel like.
I agree, 100%.
It also, I think, by this point, if you know... Most people, when they heard, hey, the Germans are going to remake All Quiet on the Western Front, we all know the end of it. So I think that kind of, it's like, we all know where the story's going. We know the beats, we know the... So it goes into with that disadvantage.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like if the 2022 version had, like, some sort of butterfly-like thing at the end, it might have...
But then we'd probably be sitting here saying that, it just ripped off the ending of the 30s.
No, I kind of like a callback to, like, the OG.
I will say, it would be interesting if Paul actually got shot, like, the last 5 minutes of the war. Mm-hmm. And, like... Again, it's hard to compare the two because the 22 version is so different than the books, or the book and the original movie. That, like, it's hard to be like, oh, they're like the same story. Because I feel like the 22 version is very much its own story. Like, it's got the same characters, it's got the same setting, but like it's very much its own unique thing. So again, it's just very hard to compare the two just because of that.
Yeah. For real.
So go watch both of
Also,
them.
wait. Okay, another thing I would like to bring up is when Paul killed the Frenchman who would like stayed alive like a while afterwards. I feel like in the 1930s version it hurt more because he was like, we could have been friends in different circumstances, and in this one he was just kind of like, ah.
I feel like that chalks it up to the fact that like the 1930s version was taking dialogue directly out of the book.
Oh, is that what happened in the book?
Yeah, okay. Paul ends up in the shell hole
because
with a French soldier.
I feel like that is such an important part of the movie because it kind of shows we're both just like boys. We're both just like guys in like different sides of the war.
I feel like it's just the difference of storytelling now versus then. Is like in the book, it's very much like when your character is talking about something, even if it's like an internal monologue, it's in quotation marks, like it's something that they're like saying. I feel like it's the same scene basically between the two, except that in the modern version, Paul's talking, and the original version, it's more like an internal monologue. I feel like, to a degree.
It's more. I kind of really wanted to hear him saying, "In different circumstances, we could have been friends." Because I feel like that line in itself shows that, regardless of what side you're on, you're just a person. In the end, you're same hopes and dreams kind of thing, and maybe you have different sides, but you could have had more in common than that.
Well, there's a pretty good poem. I can't remember who wrote it. Can't even remember the title. But it goes something like, had he and I but met by some old ancient inn, we should have sat us down to wet right many a nipperkin. But ranged his infantry, and staring face to face, I shot at him, and he at me, and killed him in his place. I shot him dead because he was my foe. Just so, my foe of course he was, that's clear enough, although he thought he'd list perhaps, offhand like, just as I, had sold his traps, was out of work, no other reason why. Yes, quaint and curious war is, you shoot a fellow down, you treat, it's been years since I've read that poem. Basically, like, if they just met at a pub at some point, they would have bought each other drinks, but, like, because they met in the battlefield, they had to kill each other. But that's definitely...
kind of reminds me of Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah, I can see that to a degree.
Because, like, innocent people, or just, like, wrong place, wrong time kind of thing.
So war's bad, okay? That's the basis.
War sucks. Rich people should just have duels again.
Yeah. We do not condone death here at heterochroMEDIA Podcast. We do not condone the homicide, things like that.
I condone rich
but
people
we
fighting
do
each
condone
other.
duels in Minecraft and Roblox.
Yes, in Thunderdome.
Yes, definitely.
Leave the general public out of your affairs, leaders.
Yeah.
They don't fucking care.
I also have one final random tangent. You think the Germans remade All Quiet on the Western Front because they were coping with 1917, that the Brits had done a big World War I film? It's pretty close.
Possibly. Well, here's the thing. I'm wondering how long the new All Quiet movie was in production.
That's a good question.
Because, of course, 2018, we had the 100th anniversary of the end of World War One. Like, I'm wondering if the idea of redoing the movie was already in the works, and they just had, because of COVID, there were, well, I guess it wasn't because of COVID, it was 2018. But I wonder if it just took them longer to actually put the movie together because of world situations than anything else. Because I know there were a couple different groups that were trying to make movies for the anniversaries of World War One, and I don't think a lot of them ended up seeing the screen, minus 1917, of course. Because I know that there was at least... Because there was a group down in Louisiana that actually had an MP-18, like one of the very few original like MP-18 submachine guns. And apparently that was being loaned out for some kind of World War I movie, and as far as I'm aware, that never saw the screen, or at least I haven't seen it yet, if it came out.
Or it ended up on your local Walmart $5 shelf.
Dude, if I found an MP18 for $5,
Not the MP18, the movie.
no, the movie, yeah,
I
maybe.
can't tell how long it was in production. It doesn't tell me.
Since the beginning of recorded history.
Well, that was the other weird thing, I guess, because like we're in 1918. Like,
It
there's
didn't. Wait. It didn't start with that quote.
what?
The quote from the beginning of the book and the beginning of the 1930s movie. Shouldn't have. I feel like it should have started with that quote.
What was the quote?
Oh, hold on now. I gotta search it.
Well, as Jessica reads through the book for the first time.
Let me read for 3 hours.
Well, it's weird though, because we're in 1918, right? So by this point, there are units in the German army that are set up as like stormtrooper units that have submachine guns, body armor, like are designed for storming enemy trenches. Why did we not see any of those in the new All Quiet movie?
That's a good question.
Because like we're at the point of the war that like those guys should have been like the point men for this assault. Like, you know.
Disney destroyed the stormtroopers so hard they can't even appear in historical pictures.
Disney destroyed.
That might be it.
All right. Here's the quote. This book is to be neither an accusation nor a confession, and least of all an adventure, for death is not an adventure to those who stand face to face with it. It will try simply to tell of a generation of men who, even though they may have escaped shells, were destroyed by war. Like, that was at the beginning of the book and the 1930s version, and I kind of feel like, as a storyteller myself, I kind of feel like it should have been the beginning of this one.
Is a different story.
I agree with that.
It may be different, but it has similar messages where it's like, yes, maybe someone survived the war, but they didn't really survive the war, you know?
Well, that was one of the last interactions that our main character and Katz had. Was like Paul was very much like, you know, how do we go back to living in normal society after all this?
It's a Lord of the Rings quote like this, but I'm not going to say it.
What?
There's a Lord of the Rings quote like this.
Yeah, but basically Paul's like, you know, we've been living on the front lines. Paul's been here for like a year and a half now. And he's like, how do we go back? And Katz is very much like the optimistic one. Like, we're still alive. Like, we still have the chance to go back and rebuild our lives. And, like, we have to, like, just take that and run with it. And Paul's definitely, like, the cynic in that of, like... Because basically, and again, they touch on this in the book, too, is basically that Paul has lived his entire adult life in the military in the First World War. He has no idea what it's like to actually work a job, to have, like, a normal life in civilian culture. Like, the battlefield is the only thing he's known. And again, that leads to this whole post-war situation in Germany where you have a lot of these veterans that join up with all these different militias and political groups because they don't know any better. They literally only know war, and they can't stand the peace. So they join up with all these different parties. Of course, the rising Nazi party, the communists. There's actually a big communist uprising in Bavaria in 1919, if I remember correctly. The army had to come in and quash, but that was a side tangent story. But it's just an interesting dichotomy between the two characters, because neither of them end up surviving the book, of course, but like...
It's kind of like, you know they're going to die.
Yeah. But definitely out of the two of them, though, Katz definitely stood the better chance of readjusting post-war, I think.
Yeah, he had an adult life before.
But in the newer version, it mentioned he had a son who died.
Well, that's the whole thing. He even mentions at one point that, like, his wife and him want to try having other kids. And like,
yeah. But I kind of feel like it made death easier for him in a way, being like, my son's on the other side, so.
Yeah.
We're giving into the despair.
Yeah.
I gotta say the quote, bros. The Lord of the Rings quote.
Yeah.
How do you go on when in your heart you begin to understand there is no going back? There are some things that time cannot mend, some hurts that go too deep. Like, that encapsulates the whole thing perfectly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, it sucks too, because like the very near the beginning of the new version of All Quiet, Paul and Katz raid a farm for a goose.
Oh my god.
And they steal the goose, they eat it, whatever. But like at the end of the movie, they go back, Paul tries stealing some eggs, barely manages to escape. The eggs get smashed, they end up just eating them raw out of like their mess tin.
And they're like, this is great.
And then the kid from Come and See follows them.
He did look like the kid from Come and See, didn't he? Damn, he looked familiar. But basically, Katz gets shot.
You're not prepared for that.
I don't even know what that is.
That's a movie that Yeah.
Well,
Do you
I think
want to go
Wendigo
to the
mentioned it.
Yeah, do you want to go to the very darkest pits of what cinema could show you?
Yeah, Come and
Always.
See is a Soviet film from the 1980s.
Okay.
And basically,
I think I know what you're talking about.
it's set on the Eastern Front during World War II. And it took, 15 years for the script to be approved or some shit like that? But basically, it follows this kid who joins up with this partisan group, which are like the resistance fighters that are fighting against the Nazis. And basically, over the course of the movie, like, all of these people that he meets dies. And he ends up, like, fleeing to this village, and then the Nazis show up in the village and kill everybody.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And the movie's just very effed up in general. But, like, the whole scene where the Nazis come to this village and start rounding everybody up is, like, the scene from the movie that everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just put it this way, we're all quiet on the Western Front, regardless of which version you watch or read, is tragic. Come and See is a nightmare.
Yeah, now I have to watch it.
Because All Quiet, it's basically all military people.
Yeah.
Come and See is very much like the Nazis.
Civilians, right?
Yeah, civilians. We're basically the in my opinion, the emotional climax of Come and See is the Germans come in this town, they round up all the people living there.
85.
Yeah, they shove them all in the church in town, and then they light it on fire.
Oh man, I've heard of this. I think I've seen the scene.
Yeah.
Right.
You probably have. The clip's on YouTube, I'm sure. But basically, like, anybody that tries to crawl out, they shoot, they throw grenades through the windows. But our main character, for whatever reason, is spared. And the German officer that's there basically, like, hauls him off the ground and sticks a pistol to his head, gets his picture taken, and then throws him on the ground, and they all leave. And basically, him and this old lady are the only two people alive in the entire village. Everybody else burned to death in that church. And it's effed up. It's one of those movies. I'll read out. You've said that you're only gonna ever watch it once.
Have you both seen it?
I've seen it. Read out hasn't.
Not yet.
I've seen it. I'll watch it again. But it's one of the few movies that's made me genuinely uncomfortable.
We need an iceberg for, like, historical films.
Yeah.
That go to
Y'all
the
can make
depravities of
that,
humanity.
honestly.
Because that'd be at the bottom.
Well, because one of the other things, because the director, I can't remember his name, but there are multiple scenes in the movie where there's no dialogue, and one of the people is just staring directly into the camera, which is...
Oh, I love when that happens.
It's very uncomfortable, let me tell
great,
you.
exactly.
I don't love it.
Because basically, the director or the writer went around and basically interviewed all these people in Belarus about their experience during World War II. And it was basically... because, like, I think it was like half the population of the country was killed during the Second World War.
Oh my gosh.
Like, the Nazis came in, they burned hundreds of villages, they killed tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people over the course of the war. And obviously that leaves scars, of course.
Yes.
So he wanted to convey that, like, discomfort of sitting with somebody who lived through all this and just having them look at you and tell them about all of their shit that they lived through.
I love when movies do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like when they're like, look into this person's eyes. You know their story now. Look at them.
Oh yeah. From a cinematography standpoint, it is a great movie.
Oh my god.
It's very hard to watch.
I assume so.
I will say that. It's...
I want to watch it, but I'm kind of nervous too.
Well, and the randomness of the brutality is also the one thing that hits me in that scene is the fact that, like, you know, our main character's a pretty young guy, but, like, he's left alive while everybody else in town gets herded in this church and burned and grenaded to death. And the only other person in the town that's alive is this old lady. And basically they carry this old lady on her bed out in the middle of the road and they just leave her there. But they're like, oh, babushka, have a good life, and they just, like, dip.
Oh my gosh.
And, of course, all the Germans are responsible for the massacre and end up dying by the end of the movie, as they deserve. But, yeah, it hits you.
Before you two give me any more nightmares and keep me up for another night.
Rocky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to wrap this one up. So, final thoughts on All Quiet on the Western Front.
Great book. Great movies. They're both good for different reasons. Watch them both. Read the book.
Absolutely tragic. Very clear on their message, and I recommend them.
You want to read the one Letterboxd review?
Which one?
You know which one I'm talking about.
The torture one?
No, the other one.
Hold up.
About the quote when the title's dropped. can't find it, just give your best reenactment of it.
Is it the Daniel Brühl one?
Yep.
Okay, so Letterboxd user Leonard says, when Daniel Brühl said, "It's all quiet on the Western Front," I literally came. Me too, bitch.
I love when the movie name drops itself.
When movies name drop themselves, I literally like freak out. Like, okay, very off topic, but when the Five Nights at Freddy's movie comes out and they say Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm gonna shit.
I don't want to be anywhere near that theater then.
No, we have to go. I'm gonna be in cosplay.
No, if you're gonna
What
drop
are
a
you
juicy.
cosplaying?
I'm cosplaying Crying Child.
You should crying.
Evan
Child for the
Afton from FNAF 4, who you play as in FNAF 4. Get with the
Kid
times.
from Come and See's gonna pop up in it too.
Homie, did y'all not watch Wendy Goon's video on Five Nights at Freddy's?
Hey, we've seen it.
I haven't.
Oh yeah, that.
Okay, well that's their homework now.
That's not my homework.
Not his. That's Connor's homework. FNAF coming to theaters October 27th, 2023.
This is how we're ending.
Jim Henson, Creature Shop.
This is how we're
the
ending our
animatronics.
review
I'm
of
sorry.
All
Wait.
Quiet on the Western
I
Front.
can't believe the All Quiet review is ending with a plug for Five Nights at Freddy's.
I'm sorry.
Go support Matthew Lillard in his newest film.
And Josh Hutcherson. And Jim Henson, Creature Shop.
I don't give a shit about them.
I love Jim Henson!
Jim Henson's dead.
I love his legacy, and
That's
I love
fair.
what he does, and I love what his company still
Well, it's fair,
does.
but still, it's on him doing it. He's dead.
Well, duh.
Like they say in Kung Fury's spirit animal. You're
Dead doesn't mean gone.
We're gonna be haunted.
No one's ever
We're gonna be
really
haunted by many different spirits from both world wars because of this.
I'm already haunted
Now
by
my
many
collection's
things.
back in the new house. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah,
I'm haunted by
but when you
things
get back,
I've
there's gonna be
seen.
ectoplasm all over the walls.
Wouldn't be the first time.
All right, we'll see you in the next installment of heterochroMEDIA.
Goodbye.
Cheers.
Yeah.